What's good, everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we are reacting to Film Theory, Very Odd Parents Broke Its Own Rules. Now, I can't really say anything about this one, because that sounds a bit cryptic, but I think there's been times where there has been plenty of loopholes within the rule book that that doesn't really help this idea. Oh wait, no, doesn't help. It actually supports this, but I don't really get it because I think there's more to this than I would think. But I'll only find out if I start this thing. So yeah, hope you all enjoy this video. If you do, hit the like button down below, hit the subscribe button to support the channel, support the content provided, and so on and so forth. The link to this video will be down in the description below, so be sure to give Film Theory some love and support for the video they made. And if you have any videos you would like to recommend, leave it down in the comment section down below. Now, with all this said, let's start this video, shall we?
I wish for Film Theory to cross 20 million subscribers.
Sorry, Matt. Can't do it.
What? Why?
Listen, the Juan did little farty noise thing, so it's against the rules.
Fine. I wish for a good
Kinda true, actually, yeah.
Against Rule 101.
I wish for another season of Gravity Falls?
Nope, Rule 3-15-4-5.
Fine. You left me no choice. I'm just gonna have to prove that there are no rules, that they're all an elaborate conspiracy to keep stock image fairies like you in check.
Say psych right now.
I will not say psych right now, sir. The rules are a lie. And I'm about to prove it.
I'm curious.
Internet, welcome to Film Theory.
Okay, I like what they did with the whole intro for Very Odd Parents. That was clever.
You know, one of the classic Nicktoons that I always thought flew under the radar was the Fairly Odd Parents.
Understandable.
Time can get annoying if it's not the right person. Are you leaving me? I thought you loved me.
This show
Was that the episode where Timmy wished that him and Trixie were the only people left on Earth?
How many years ago?
How old are you?
And why not? It's a show
Fucking
about a little boy
brutal.
named Timmy Turner with two fairy godparents that grant his every wish. Sounds
Honestly, his
awesome.
parents are not really the best parents in the Very Odd Parents universe. I mean, they constantly blame their own son.
Every wish. You see, the fairy godparents do have some limitations on what wishes they can and can't grant, all of which are
Not
outlined in
that I
the
would
magical
fully
legal
blame
document
them, because
simply
Timmy
as
does
it
make some
is.
bad
In
wishes.
fact, the show goes to great lengths to explain the rigorous training that fairy godparents have to endure so that the rules never get broken. And that makes sense, right? Every magic system has to have rules. 3 wishes for a genie, no wishing for more wishes, no making people fall in love. All the classic stuff. So the world of the Fairly Odd Parents shouldn't be that different, right? Right? Well, you know, when I start asking rhetorical questions like that, it's because the answer probably isn't as obvious as it seems. Nope, loyal theorists, after watching the show maybe a bit too intently for a children's cartoon, it's become clear to me that
It's your
rules
job.
are actually more like the big fat
No one
lie,
would judge you.
lies perpetuated by a muscle-bound guardian preparing the fairy world for war. Don't believe me? Grab your
War.
wings, your wings, and floaty crown things. It's time to
Considering how they act, they don't look ready for war.
What's exactly in the rules?
According to the rules, fairy godparents only grant wishes to kids.
As I just talked about, the rules are a collection of guidelines that determine what wishes a fairy godparent can and
I guess that makes sense. They do mention it a bunch of times.
Fairies can't grant a wish that intentionally kills or hurts someone. No wishes for money, no wishes that interfere.
Plus, when you're an adult, you kind of tend to forget
no wishes for anyone
to not believe in some of the stuff you did as a kid. So, makes sense. Obviously.
Otherwise, they're gonna lose their fairies, their memories, and reverse every wish they've ever had. It's a pretty harsh system, but then again, it seems sensible for upholding the structure of this magical world. We're told in the show that a fairy's primary purpose is to bring joy, and the rules help prevent any wishes that might result in a net negative of joy. Plus, to help make sure that a god kid doesn't unintentionally break a rule, there are safeguards in place. The wish won't get granted, and instead the fairy's wand dims, wilts, and then makes a fart sound.
I will prove my whimsy when I change you into a...
In general, it seems safe to say that the rules are fundamental to fairy society, with the first rules having been drafted long ago by the council, 4 ancient and powerful fairies that rule over the fairy world. But the rules also seem to be a living document, with new rules getting added all the time. For instance, you cannot wish for every day to be Christmas, which got added after Timmy wished for exactly that, and things got messy in a hurry.
Wow! They've added a new rule! You really gotta mess up big time to make that happen!
But the more you watch the show, the more
That makes
skeptical you
sense.
get about
I mean,
rules. Some of them are just nonsensical.
I'd rather not live the same day for the rest of my life.
Clowns, French New Wave
Because
film
if it
canon,
happens to be the
weird
worst day of my life, you do not want to live the worst day of your life over and over again.
Others are just simply inconvenient, like the fact that breakfast-related wishes are denied after 10:30 a.m. But then there are the rules
But
that are just flat out
there's
dangerous. For example,
brunch.
fairies must always attempt to grant the
So,
wishes of their godchildren, even if they just offhandedly say,
isn't that kind of
"I wish."
reductive?
Doesn't matter if they're conscious or
Because you
not.
can technically have breakfast for brunch.
On top of that, there are these massive loopholes into rules that Timmy often demonstrates throughout the show.
Jorgen said whatever's in the book is a rule, so...
Timmy Turner doesn't have to follow any of the rules!
This then becomes a huge problem in one episode, with Timmy making all sorts of rule-breaking wishes for money, to win multiple reality show competitions, and for his crush to fall in love with him. He later writes that no fairy
That was
godparents have
really
followed the rules
dumb.
either, thereby causing the rules to almost self-destruct and destroy the entire universe.
Every rule-free wish destabilizes the book further. If the book explodes, so does the universe.
It's pretty horrifying, right? So the rules then are clearly responsible for holding together the fabric of reality, and yet that just...
I don't think so.
Granting aren't powers that are
I think it would be more like
in this world.
it's built up so much energy and power and so much restrictions that it just soon became an atomic bomb that destroys the universe.
Don't follow any rules. Even their limit on 3 wishes isn't real.
And I can't use my last wish to wish for more wishes, can I?
Well, that's in that continuity.
Some humans have also gained the ability to wield magic, like the wizard Merlin, and all he uses his powers for is to help his nephew Arthur win competitions and become royalty, a direct violation of the rule against cheating.
I've already cast a spell. The next Mo yanks his sword is gonna be the King of England.
Then there are the Pixies, who are just as magical as the fairies, but treat it as a business. All of their wish granting is seen as transactional, with bureaucratic rules and red tape that controls everything. And yet, just like any good,
I don't think it's like that.
Bending and breaking their own rules to get ahead. During a mini golf competition that's subject to important contractual
That's like saying someone can only use certain types of magic.
And yet, despite all of this rule
So
breaking,
that it might be similar to that.
maybe that's just other creatures breaking the rules. Maybe fairies operate by a different form of logic or a different code of magic. Maybe their magic is different and disconnected from the rest.
Exactly.
Well, that's not true either. First of all, Timmy and his fairies break the rules all the time, to the point where
Really?
I'd literally be here all day if I just wanted to list out examples. Just for the sake of showing some work, here are a few. In Ruled Out, Timmy wishes his parents couldn't care less about him, violating the rule against interfering with love. In I Dream of Cosmo, Cosmo hits his head and briefly believes that he's become a weenie. That's part witch, part genie. He proceeds then to grant several rule-breaking wishes to Timmy's dad, including wishing for money, thereby breaking the rule on counterfeiting. The rule against cheating in competitions?
True.
Now it's basically broken every other episode, like in Foul Bald, Superbike, Movie Magic, just to name a few. That last one actually is my favorite example of rule breaking because Cosmo literally rips a page out of his copy of the rules that forbids him from helping Timmy, thereby implying that fairies can basically ignore any rule if they so choose. But perhaps the most egregious example of breaking the rules is mentioned in Hassle in the Castle, when it's revealed that Cosmo and Wanda's most infamous former god kid
Abused our magic, took out Archduke Ferdinand, and plunged the world into World War I!
Yeah, even without wishing directly for the death of the Archduke, World War I caused 20 million deaths and 21 million injuries. I would say that that one caused a net negative of joy. So, something suspicious is going on with these rules. These things are supposed
Okay, yeah, I can see the point.
unbreakable, potentially world-ending, and yet they're broken all the time. Therefore, they're a lie. I've proven my thesis. Film theory becomes film fact. Thanks, everyone. Let's wrap it early. Slap a dark truth in big old red text on a thumbnail and ship it. Well, not quite. Sure, at this point we've proven that the rules are full of lies and you can break them pretty much whenever you want, but we're still left with one major question: why? If these things aren't real and they're not
True.
consistently, then why are they here at all? It can't possibly be because it's a cartoon for children and breaking the rules would make for easily manufactured drama. No, that's not it. See, the more I kept
That might be it too.
the series, everything started to point back to one person, the one magical creature in control of both the rules and the fairy world writ large, Jorgen von Strangle, self-proclaimed toughest fairy in the universe.
I am Drill Sergeant Jorgen von Strangle, and these are my muscles.
Jorgen is a major supporting character in the series, the guardian of the rules who knows them by heart so he can properly enforce them. He's also in charge of training fairies at his Fairy Academy boot camp, as well as assigning godparents to new god kids who need joy in their life. Basically, he's the fairy general of the fairy army.
I will send you back to the Fairy Academy for 1,000 years of training.
But if he's such a pro of the fairy world, why is he propping up this book of lies? Well, everything starts to click into place thanks to 2 episodes. First, there's School's Out the Musical, where the Pixies attempt to take over the fairy world. Remember these guys? They're the magical creatures that are obsessed with destroying joy and whimsy and replacing it with contracts, boredom, and rules. Yeah, it's a bit suspicious, isn't it? In this episode, the Pixies find a sad infant clown named Flappy Bob, and they enact a 37-year anti-fun plan, acting as Flappy Bob's own godparents for decades. But instead of granting him every wish for clownish fun, they mold him into a boring Harvard law-educated businessman. Meanwhile, the Pixies trick Timmy into wishing that kids were in charge of the Earth in retaliation against all their rules and laws. But here's a problem. With kids now in charge, every fairy godparent is pulled back into fairy world because the kids no longer need them.
According to the rules, fairies can only be assigned to children in need.
And the rules also state that if Pixies are the last magical creatures on Earth, they're granted control over the planet, which is exactly what happens. Has to be one of the worst case scenarios for the fairies, who basically only exist to bring joy to others.
We're just enjoying the show. Your misery is like going to the movies for us.
This sequence of events raises a ton of questions. If fairies are kicked off the Earth, if kids are suddenly in charge, why isn't wishing for that something that's explicitly listed in the rules? Meanwhile, all of this happened only because Flappy Bob was never granted a fairy godparent. Clearly, he was miserable during his childhood, and yet he got a pixie for some reason.
Sanderson, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful new 37-year plan.
Why? Timmy was assigned Cosmo and Wanda because he didn't want to do chores. I think an orphaned clown having the circus pummeled out.
Well, you also have to consider his babysitter, Vicky, and the fact that his parents tend to neglect him here and there, so... I mean, his teacher's freaking awful. His friends are just barely considered friends.
During his childhood and done something about it. Jorgen also isn't surprised when the Pixies reference that obscure loophole that gives him control of Earth in the rules, so he clearly knows that it exists.
Let us go! Timmy needs us!
No, he does not. According to the rules, fairies can only be assigned to children in need.
And as the guardian of the master copy of the rules, he's one of the only people who can change them as he pleases. So this should have been something that he rectified well before it became a problem. So why didn't he? Why is Jorgen lying about the rules? Well, Jorgen didn't stop this precisely because he did see it coming. He wanted this to happen. He wanted the fairies pulled back into the fairy world. It's all part of a larger plan. At first, I thought that maybe Jorgen wasn't actually a fairy, but instead some sort of undercover pixie on the inside. I mean, he loves rules and enforcing them just like the Pixies.
Now we're pulling back the fairies, so I can bring them pain.
But we learned definitively in the Season 7 episode Cosmo Rules that he's actually Cosmo's cousin, thereby proving that he's a fairy.
Say hello to your other, more deep, dark family secretish cousin, Cosmo! Cousins?
So what then is his deal? Well, it all comes down to that second episode I mentioned earlier and then left unexplained until now for dramatic effect. You see, the last piece of the puzzle that brings everything together is the Season 6 finale, Wishology. Here, we learned that the fairies
Wishology.
were sweet, cute, cuddly creatures that we know of today.
In ancient fairy times, a fairy's main job was to fight, not frolic.
Basically, fairies were once a race of super soldiers at war with a force known as the Darkness, which was only defeated when thousands of fairy warriors combined their powers to create a neutralizing light. And even then, the Fairy Council prophesied that the darkness would one day return. They sent millions of the strongest fairy warriors out into the void of space to create an early warning system for Fairy World, should the darkness ever return. According to the lore of the series, that's exactly why there are stars in the sky. All those stars, they're fairies on the lookout. Now, that's a cool story and all, but just think about its implications. Fairy World must have been devastated by this war with the darkness, if millions of them were sent into space at the end of the fighting just to be a warning system. That's not even thinking about how many died during combat. Their population has clearly dwindled to a point where the entirety of Fairy World can fit inside of a gumball machine.
Every fairy in Fairy World must be in here!
And it's not like fairies reproduce quickly either. In Fairly Odd Baby, Cosmo and Wanda's child Poof is born, and we learn that the last fairy child born before Poof was Cosmo himself.
It all started when the last baby was born in Fairy World. Me!
And yet, in The Fast and the Furious, we meet Cosmo and Wanda's very first godchild, the caveman credited with inventing the wheel. That means that at minimum, another new fairy hasn't been born since at least the Paleolithic era 40,000 years ago. Even the fairy economy seems to be suffering, unable to fill positions in vital public services like law enforcement.
Isn't there supposed to be a good cop and a bad cop?
We had some cutbacks.
And so Jorgen did what he thought he needed to do. He created a sham system that would eventually result in kids losing their fairies, and those fairies then having to return to the fairy world. For centuries, he's been tweaking the rules, trying to create a situation where the god kids of Earth mess up so badly that the godparents have no choice but to abandon them. That's why he allowed the Pixies to exploit the loophole. After kids become the dominant species on Earth, he's happy to pull all those fairies back to fairy world. In the episode, we see him being put to work in real jobs that can help rebuild their infrastructure. He wants the fairies back to rebuild their population. Remember, before Poof, Cosmo was the last fairy child born, and he's older than the entirety of human civilization. In short, when humans came into being, production of new fairies stopped. And without the need to train godparents, there's a perfect excuse to turn the Fairy Academy into an actual fairy army boot camp. Jorgen knows that the darkness is going to return, and he's been spending his entire life preparing for it. That's why his physique is so much more like the fairy warriors of old, and why he immediately takes charge of the entire fairy world when the darkness returns, sending all the other fairies to be protected in a gumball machine as he tries his best to fight back. He begrudgingly teams up with Timmy, someone he loathes. He even sacrifices himself to make sure that Timmy can save the fairy world. That is his primary goal, no matter the cost. And here's the thing, his plan seems to work. Timmy is able to dispel the darkness by showing it love, thereby turning it towards kindness. And towards the end of the series, we learn that there's a shortage of fairy godparents, partially because fairies have begun pursuing careers within fairy world.
Due to overwhelming demand and fairies taking on better paying jobs, there is a fairy godparent.
That said, Jorgen's plan didn't work well enough. He still had to suffer through all those episodes with the dog fairy.
Ugh.
I know a lot of
I mean,
because I just ate a dictionary.
But hey,
that one was so.
Our world, you should check
But it
out
was
the
after
for today's episode,
they
Arrow,
introduced
change the way you
that
drink
one new
water.
female character
Your
that
brain.
everything
You've been
went
watching any
from
of the Theorist channels lately?
bad to
You know how this
worse.
works, 'cause I talk about these awesome bottles every chance I get. But if not, Air Up uses scent to trick your brain into thinking that the regular old water you're drinking is packed with flavor. And it's not using fairy godparent magic for it, it's using real science. So, how's it work? Well, you may not realize this. T and then number 10 for a 10% discount on your order.
Okay, this was a freaking idea. Now, Jorgen making the populace go up so that they can be better prepared for the crisis of the darkness does make sense. If it stopped at season 6. You all might say otherwise, but yeah, it would be a perfect end for season 6. The series would end at season 6 and all that, but they continued. It was alright after a few seasons, but after they introduced the dog, it went from... It went a little down. I went to the so-so thing. There were some really good ones, some bad ones, and then the animation got weirder, and they had Chloe, I believe. That's what her name was, and oh, that's a mess itself. That was a freaking mess. Anyway, the rules. Yeah, it makes sense. Jorgen doing all this to prepare for the darkness, bring up the economy and all that. It makes sense. But despite everything, it doesn't really seem like the very, very best thing. Because they don't look fighting ready to go against the darkness. I mean, do some support here and there, yes, but no. Other than support, that's it. Also, I don't think the rules is like this sentient thing, but I think the more rules and the more conditions and how long the rules has been around just end up building up so much energy that doing anything that goes beyond what it can handle to break apart and cause the event of it exploding. Basically, I'm saying like one or a couple kids doing this here and there wouldn't be too big of a problem, but the mass buildup of energy throughout all these years, and every single kid's doing it, bam, freaking bomb. And yeah, it still has its problems at the end due to the economy, because you gotta have more odd parents, and yeah, it's just like a big mess to deal with. But yeah, I can see how this can work out. But anyway, hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button down below. Hit the subscribe button to support the channel, support the content provided, and so on and so forth. You'll know when you subscribe when the red subscribe button turns gray. You'll be notified by pressing that notification button next to the subscribe button, and it's lit up to show that you're notified. Wow, that was like a tongue twister right there. Anyway, tell me your thoughts on this theory in the comment section below. The link to this video will be in the description below, so give Phil Theory once again some love and support for the video they made. Other than that, hope you'll enjoy. I'll see you all next time. Bye!